Hello, friends. Good afternoon. This is Will coming to you from Dmitri's balcony at Hotel Schatzalp in Davos, Switzerland, formerly Sanatorium Schatzalp. And I'm sad to say today that I found out just this morning that Greg King passed away yesterday. One of the probably most venerated English language writers on the Romanovs, and a fellow with really an encyclopedic knowledge. So he will be greatly missed. And this one's for you, Greg. So we're up to the 26th of April. Our recap, we have on the 25th, Dmitri referred to monarchical ecstasy that apparently he perceived to have sprung up at that time among the Russian colony, and that in the grip of this monarchical ecstasy, he had heard that members of the emigration were going over to Kirill, as he put it, though he said he didn't like that expression. And on the one hand, he said he'd discovered that the rumors were exaggerated, but on the other hand, he still spoke with a little bit of, I don't know, he was grumbling about it, and a little bit of bitterness maybe, in saying, well, it doesn't matter because fate will decide. And, he needed to be careful. We saw what happened before when he really dived into all of this and how deeply depressed he got. So he was, I think, correct to sort of try to put things in the perspective of, well, it doesn't really matter. And in fact, it really didn't. So no Coco yesterday for the first time since they'd gotten back from their trip. But we have her today, and beside her, we also have a visit from muddle-headed Gustav, so Prince Gustav of Denmark, and red-headed Mitya, Dmitri Sheremetyev. So let's find out more about them. It's the 26th of April, 1921, a Tuesday in Paris, 76 Rue Miromesnil. In the morning, since it was Holy Week, I went to church. I found Maria, Gulia, and Mamushka there. We stood in a little room next to the altar. After the service, I went to the Bois with Maria. The weather was wonderful. I lunched at the Ritz with old Gustav of Denmark. His 3-week stay in Nice and Paris had changed a little. He's the same inaccurate and comical fellow. We lunched à deux, and he seemed to be a little offended that I was served first. I went home after lunch, changed, and went to Saint Cloud to play golf with Axel. My game was terrible. All the technique I acquired in Monte Carlo is lost. I had tea with Coco at the Ritz. I dined at Maria's. Red-headed Mitya Sheremetyev was there. He sings gypsy ballads really well, and Alec accompanied him on the guitar. Then Maria sang. Overall, it was a very nice evening. Well, it sounds nice, doesn't it? Okay. So, Holy Week, of course, the week leading up to Easter, and I'm not so sure that Dmitri would ordinarily have gone to church on Holy Tuesday. There is a service every day during Holy Week, which is not usually the case. Unlike in the Catholic Church, where you have unmarried priests, the parish priests in the Orthodox Church are married, and since one is supposed to abstain from marital relations, among other things, before serving a liturgy, they do not have daily liturgies or masses in the Orthodox Church, but during Holy Week, yes. So Dmitri, as we've seen, was taking it seriously. In particular this year, so he goes to church, apparently not knowing that other family members would be there. He finds Maria and Gulia and Mamushka, his stepmother, and lo and behold, they are in a separate room. And we heard more about this separate room in his long diary entry for the 30th of April, because, as you recall, he said that, well, technically, he and Maria did have the option of receiving the Eucharist in this separate room, as they had done when they were young, when they visited their father in Paris and went to church. They received the Eucharist apart from the other parishioners in a separate room. But he said the priest let them know that he frowned on this, and so they decided not to insist. Well, apparently this whole thing got started then, earlier, maybe on this Holy Tuesday, maybe even before. They were making use of this separate room, and the priest at some point let them know that he didn't want this to continue, that he didn't approve of this. So that's interesting. I'm glad we found out a little bit more about that. Dmitri says it's next to the altar, a little room next to the altar, and it probably a vestry, maybe, unless it was built specifically for them. When I'm in Paris, I think in June, maybe I can find someone that I can ask about that at the church at Rue de Rue, St. Alexander Nevsky Church, if I remember correctly, because the altar in an Orthodox church is not accessible. It's behind the iconostasis, and nobody goes back there who isn't serving a specific function. And women don't go back there at all. There are no altar girls. Altar boys can go back, and deacons and priests, but you have to have a reason for being there, even if you are male. And so this, if this little room was next to the altar, as Dmitri says, then it was behind a wall. It was completely separate. They weren't looking at the altar. It was, like I say, probably where the vestry would ordinarily be. So in fact, a little bit of trivia, the Emperor of Russia was the only non-clergy person who was allowed to enter the altar area through the royal doors. So the royal doors are the two doors that separate the altar area from the nave of the church. In a Russian Orthodox church, the iconostasis and the royal doors and the two doors that the altar boys and the deacons and other servers go through, all of those go all the way up to the ceiling. But in a Greek Orthodox church, they don't. So you can you have a better view of the altar area. But anyway, an emperor, a tsar, was the only one who was allowed to enter the altar area through the royal doors, aside from the priest or the bishop, if he was present or if he is present. I don't think Mr. Putin would have the chutzpah to try that. Hopefully not, even though he may think of himself as an emperor. Okay, so muddle-headed Gustav, old Gustav, Dmitri calls him this time. Well, if this is the Gustav that I think it has to be, then he wasn't more than 4 years older than Dmitri, I think. So why Dmitri would call him old Gustav, I don't know. I tried to find another Prince Gustav of Denmark and could not. So, Dmitri has sometimes strange ideas about how he classifies people. Some people as old who are, quite young, and other people as young who are actually very close to his age. I remember in Denmark he was talking about some very young couple who'd just gotten married, and they were like a year older than him. But anyway, unless any of you know of another Prince Gustav of Denmark who was, what conventionally at that time would have been considered an old man, then I guess this must be young Gustav of Denmark. And, Dmitri's always a little bit patronizing of him. He's muddle-headed. He had these set plans for a 3-week stay in Paris, and niece, but apparently they've changed and gotten mixed up. But the real interesting thing about this, of course, is this idea of royal precedence at the table that Dmitri perceived. He might have been wrong, but he perceived that Gustav was a little offended when the waiter came and served Dmitri his food first. And what, if you really went deeply into the protocol, who would have had precedence? I don't know. That's the sort of thing that Greg King probably could have fielded. Whether it would be a prince of a still ruling royal family, Denmark, the younger son of the king, or whether it would have been a Grand Duke in exile, the cousin of the Tsar, who was, of course, from a much grander country, an empire, a country with an emperor rather than just a king. Yeah, I don't know. But if Gustav was offended by that, it was silly of him. I suppose it might even have been the case that the waiter just brought whoever's food was ready first or nearest at hand. Anyway, something a little bit interesting. Yeah, we can definitely see that Dmitri was not a natural at golf, but he kept trying, so good for him. Now, who was Count Dmitri Sergeyevich Sheremetyev? He was in his 50s. He was married to a Mangdan, and the Mangdans were part of the court of Grand Duke Sergei and Grand Duchess Ella, and Maria and Dmitri grew up in close proximity to them and knowing them and being sort of en famille with them. So since Mitya, Sheremetyev's wife, was a Mangdan, he was, an old friend, or at least an old acquaintance. I didn't know until now that he had red hair, so he was redheaded Mitya. Anyway, quite good, we're told, at singing gypsy ballads, and Maria sang too. And Dmitri, I have to say, and at least one other diary entry previous to this one, had remarked that his sister was not a very good singer, but when they had company, sometimes she wanted to sing. And so that reminds me a little bit of Mary, one of the Bennett sisters in Pride and Prejudice, if you're familiar with that book. So what do we have next time? Well, we have a young man coming to Dmitri to ask for advice en route to London. So other than that, kind of a quiet day, and we're back to our routine with Coco of having tea with her every day, and beyond that, really nothing much. At least Dimitri's not telling us about anything else other than having tea with her, sometimes dinner, sometimes going to the theater, but he's not in the grip of a passionate love affair, clearly. But that notwithstanding, every diary entry has interesting things added in it, so do come back, and I'll see you next time. Bye.